idols. He makes Egypt throw them out. And now here they are before this mountain, which is smoking with fire, quaking, etc. And the God of the universe is saying, I want to be your God, and I want you to be my people. Pretty heady stuff. To go from being a slave with nothing in a few months, here is the God of the universe saying, I've chosen you. I want you to be mine. Amazing transformation, or not transformation, but a change of events for them. So we're going to look at chapter 24. We're going to look at the first couple of verses. First of all, we're going to talk about the elders, because this is right after the last of chapter 23. The covenant is concluded. So let's read the first couple of verses, and we'll start there with Al and Lynn.
Okay.
24, verse 1.
Then he said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance.
Okay, so we have an invitation to the elders. Now, first of all, who are these elders? Who do you think they are? People of the tribes. Okay, good. Where would they have been from? I mean, the tribes, obviously, but why would they have been selected, do you suppose?
These potentially have been those judges.
Ooh, what a great thought, John. Let's flip back a couple of pages here to chapter 18. Chapter 18 and verse 21. This is Jethro talking to Moses. He's been watching Moses in his day job as he sits all day long judging people. And chapter 18, verse 21, Jethro says, furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. Let them judge the people at all times, and let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge, so it will be easier for you, and you will be able to bear the burden. So here we have Jethro giving us advice. We talked about that. We talked about how God used Jethro to give the advice that God could have given, but he wanted to use Jethro. So the chances are very good that these 70 are from this group that's been selected. Now, it's a little curious it says 70 because it didn't say 70 before. It didn't say how many there were. They're going to be leaders of tens, hundreds, thousands. So there's going to be a hierarchy, kind of like a lower court, higher court, etc. So we can only speculate that 70 of these people were selected as being the special people, the special elders. We'll see the 70 again mentioned in Numbers chapter 11. So the 70 is a select group that continues. And not only does it continue then, it continues throughout Jewish history. What was the group of 70 called in the time of Jesus? The Sanhedrin, right. The Sanhedrin literally means the assembly. And there were 70 people, actually 71, including the high priest, that would meet regularly at the time of Jesus. So this continued on. So the 70 is continuing on throughout history. Yes? Yes, good point.
In fact, Pharisees couldn't be a Pharisee until after they were at least 30 years old.
Okay.
I started his ministry at 30, ironically.
Sure.
And yet, there's a lot of reference for age and respect of age as well. So this whole elder thing leads into that.
Right. Yeah, and actually ancient peoples, generally speaking, did respect elders a lot more than, like modern day Americans. Go ahead, Lem. Okay. Well, moving on. All right. I didn't quite get that, but okay, Lem. So this is a number used to signify the elders of the land, 70, and like Bill mentioned, they're older, they're respected. They've got more experience behind them than perhaps a younger person does. And now this group is going to be given an amazing privilege. What is this privilege going to be? yeah, you're going to be able to go up with Moses, and you are going to worship. Now, it's still going to be a distance. They're not going to be allowed to go right up to him, but there is a distance that is signified between them and him. But even so, it's still a great privilege compared to the rest of the people who are still at the foot of the mountain. So these people are given an amazing privilege. Now, the supreme privilege belongs to Moses. For your note, if you're taking your notes there, letter B, Moses is given the supreme privilege. He gets to actually come near the Lord, but these people are going to be able to come relatively close. I kind of call this what's called a threefold separation. There's a threefold separation between the people on the mountain and also, well, it continues on. So some of you have been asking when I was going to be using my art skills again. So the moment you've been waiting for? Ooh. Sad, isn't it? Okay. So you have the land right here. You have the mountain, which, as I understand it, the mountain they think is Sinai, just basically almost like juts up like this, just out of the ground like that. Okay. So over here, you have the peeps. Okay. Here's all the people. All right. 4 years of art school. No, just kidding. Okay. Now the elders, the 70 elders, are going to get to come up here. Okay. They're going to get to go up and actually worship God at a distance. Now we have the mountain itself. You know, the mountain itself looks like it's on fire with smoke and everything else. And Moses is the one who could actually come up to the very top. Okay? So we have a threefold separation here. You have a separation between the people in general and God. You have a separation between them and these people and God, and then Moses and God. So there's a threefold separation between these people. Now, interestingly, this threefold separation doesn't end. Another thing we're going to be studying about in the near future is going to be the tabernacle. So in the tabernacle, you had the main courtyard where people could gather. You had the holy place. Who could go into the holy place? Priests. Only priests could go in the holy place, and they would take care of things like the lights and the altar of showbread, etc. And this is the Holy of Holies, and who could go in the Holy of Holies? The high priest once a year with a rope tied around him in case he didn't do his purification stuff right, so they could pull him back out. Seriously. Okay? So here you have another threefold separation, just like at the mountain. You have a separation with the people, between the priests, the people, and God, and then, of course, only one priest could go in once a year and to offer the blood on the Ark of the Covenant. So we have this threefold separation that continues even during the time of Moses. Okay, why do you suppose there is this threefold separation? Why do you suppose that is? Or to add to that, how does this apply to their training? Because remember, everything that's going on around them, they're being trained. They know nothing or very little about God, and so much of this is to train them. What's this training them about? Who's God? Who is He? What's one of His main characteristics? He's holy. And, you know, holiness is really hard to describe. Often, when I describe holiness, I find myself describing it as to what it's not. You know, it's not sin. It's not this. Because it's hard to describe holiness, the idea is holy, with an A-W, holy above everything else. Completely free, no sin, etc. He's holy. So He's teaching them that He is a holy God. And not only is He holy, who gets to dictate the terms by which He's worshipped? The holy God, right? God, we're the offenders. We're the ones with the sin nature. We're the ones who rebelled. So if there's going to be any reconciliation, God has to prescribe it. He has to bring it about. And that's what He's doing right here with the time of Moses. He's showing them, this is what I want you to do to worship me. And at that time, that's what's being done. That's why we have the threefold separation here, and also the separation continues on as it goes. he tells us that they're being trained, as it were. Let's pick up with verses 3. Go ahead, Jen. Oh, good. Yeah, kind of a reverence toward these people as well. Yeah, good.
Well, and these are elders, you mentioned that Moses selected them, and then it talks about in the next chapter the elders came. And then, but I think this, in some respects, too, this is God affirming those elders that were appointed.
Good, yes, it is.
You have appointed them, but now I'm affirming what you did. I thank you.
Exactly. And also, kind of with that, too, with added responsibility often comes added privilege. In this case, these people are bearing the responsibility of the people with Moses, and they're actually getting an added privilege to that. Can that be carried over today? Say it again? Chain of command, good, yes, yes. Our elders of a church, could they be considered to be conduits of not only blessing, but also the recipients of, it's hard for me to say it, a little bit more grace than maybe the rest of us? What do you think? Maybe. You're right. We might touch on that again today. We don't see God the Father yet. Correct. But even with Jesus, there was a hierarchy. He had the 12. He had, interestingly, the 70 who followed him, all together. So even with them, there's a hierarchy. So I'm kind of the opinion that, in a sense, this hasn't really changed. If a person is given a position of authority or leadership, and I think for the church, deacons, elders, because they are going to be doing more in the church, have more responsibility, quite possibly they might get more privilege and blessing as well. Just a thought. That's kind of what we're seeing right there. Let's pick up with verse 3. Daniel, we'll start with you. We'll read verses 3 to 8 here. All right, thank you. Hold on right there. Okay, so we see in verse 3 that Moses relates chapters 21 to 23 to them verbally. He tells them what the Lord has already explained to him when he was on the mountain. Moses has just descended the mountain. By the way, this is a second climb. How many times do you think Moses climbs this mountain? Now, this is something I was telling Pastor Justin this morning, I've read this dozens and dozens of times, and yet when I'm teaching, I always learn things. I didn't know that. How many times did he go up that mountain? What do you think? Venture a guess. 4? 6? What's that? 3? 5. It's actually 5 times. In just a minute, he's going to go up for the 3rd time with the elders, okay? He'll go up for a 4th time to get the 10 Commandments, and then he'll go up the 5th time to get the new 10 Commandments after he broke the first set, okay? I don't know. It's kind of cool. I didn't know that. It's 7,000 feet if it's the same mountain. This guy, he's 80. Now, I know 80 wasn't 80 like it is now, unless you are Melody's dad, who's what? He's 80. He's running a race today. He's running a race today. He's 80. I walk from my recliner to the kitchen, stop, do a pulse check. I'm going to be okay. You know, so, go ahead, Bill.
Well, it was Moses that wrote chapter 90 and said, 70 and by strength 80. So even at that point, he was unusual.
Yeah, that's a good.
God gave him amazing extra length as well as a few other people. But yeah, this was a big deal even to him.
Yeah, good, thank you. Hunter, did I see your hand raised up? Okay. Do you have anything you'd like to say, though? I'd like to say I don't want to be in this class anymore. So anyway, up and down this mountain 5 times. He's amazing. Okay. So there again, he verbally gives chapters 21 to 23 out, including all these rules and laws we just talked about, things like slavery, property rights, what happens if somebody gets injured, all these things that we've been talking about. He verbally gives this to them. You can call them the preliminary rules of employment if you want, just because it kind of makes sense. Not all inclusive, but this is the initial set of rules. What do you think? And in verse 3, what was the response of the people?
People do everything.
Yeah. You might call it overwhelming agreement. We'll do everything. We'll do everything that you say. Overwhelming acceptance. Now, there again, I want to kind of capture the mindset of this people. Put yourself in their sandals. You've been through slavery. Where are you right now? You free? But geographically, where are you right now? What? Nowhere. You're in front of this mountain, and what's the mountain doing? It's smoking and burning, and we don't know if the quaking and noise kept going, but it did initially. This is what you're looking at, you know, and I mean, your mindset's probably going to be, whatever that's all about, yeah, that's me, I want that. You're a little intimidated. I'm not saying they weren't sincere, okay, but I'm saying put yourself in their sandals, and it's like, oh, you know, whoa, this is really a significant event. So every now and then you have to step back and say, well, what are they doing? Can you think of another biblical character that made a rash promise and didn't quite follow through with it? What's that? Jephthah? Yeah, Jephthah. Well, although Jephthah may have followed through with it, you know, sacrificing his daughter perhaps. Who else? Peter, Lord. Even if everybody falls away, and by the way, he's saying this out loud so the other 11 folks can hear him. Even if these 11 lowlifes don't follow you, you know, I will. And then, just a few hours later, he's sitting by a fire or standing by a fire, and a slave girl walks up to him and says, weren't you with Jesus? Oh, no, I don't know him. No real threat. The slave girl, okay? So it's not unusual to make these promises. Now, were they sincere? I think they were. Was Peter sincere? Absolutely. He was, in fact, he's the only one that drew his sword to fight for Jesus. So he knew he was all in, at least initially. It's easy to make vows or to make promises and not follow through. But they didn't promise to great depth. You're looking at this mountain, you're looking at the fire, the smoke, you make this promise, but how deep is your promise? And I don't know. Well, I do know, actually. 40 days from now, we're going to find out, at least chronologically. What makes us have depth in ourselves and depth in our promises and depth in our commitment? What makes it that way for us? Say it again? Oftentimes hardships, right. When you go through difficult times with the Lord, when He does deliver you, when He shows Himself faithful and you go, oh, then your depth increases. You can trust the Lord in this event because you trusted Him in that event and it worked out. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work out always the way you want. He's not Santa Claus, okay? It may work out the way you don't want, but even in that, He's still with you and His purposes are above our purposes. We'll talk some more about that in just a bit. In verse 4, we see that Moses writes these words. So Moses wrote down all the words. So chapters 21 to 23, Moses writes them down. Now this is the second time that Moses is talked about as being literate, and he writes. Now Moses, if you remember, was a highly educated man. He was probably educated in all the all the educational institutions of Egypt. He probably had a military background because that's what they did in royalty back in those days. And they still do it nowadays. I mean, look at the Prince Charles and Andrew, and they went through the military. So even nowadays, royalty will often go through military training as well as everything. The man was not a lightweight. He was highly educated. This is the second time he's told to write these things down. He's also told in chapter 17, when they fight the Amalekites, God tells him, I want you to write this down, the story of this event, and Moses does. So, and obviously we know that Moses wrote the whole first 5 books eventually. Yes, go ahead. No small task, yeah. What do you say that?
Well, there's lots of material that he
Oh, yeah.
writing it all down is going to take a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just these 3 chapters, you got to, I mean, I know the Holy Spirit's going to help him, and he's going to be without error. I realize that. But still, you're thinking through it, and you're remembering as you're writing. That's a lot of stuff. Yeah. That's good job. My phone just made a beep, which reminds me, I don't want to be that one, which I might have been today. We then see, after he writes this down, he builds an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars. So, he builds an altar at the bottom, and there's 12 pillars. Now, we don't know how this was situated, but here's how I think it was situated. I think the pillars would have been probably like this, either all the way around the altar or right there, with the altar between that and the mountain. That's just my imagination and what I think. Now, this is quite the visual. You have the people, you have the altar, you have the pillars. The elders are no longer there, neither is Moses, but you have this smoky mountain, possibly still quaking, possibly making noise, we don't know, but if nothing else, at least visually, it is burning and smoking. So that's quite the visual event for these people to see. Now, this also is Moses' second altar. He built an altar again. After the battle with the Amalekites, they built an altar there too. So this is the second altar that Moses is recorded as building. Verse 5, it talks about the young men. Who are these young men, or who do you think these young men might be? Any thoughts? Say it again. Could be Aaron's sons, although I think there were more than that, probably. Flip back to chapter 13 just for a second in Exodus. And this is just after the Passover, well, just before actually. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, verse 1 of 13, saying, Sanctify to me every firstborn, the first offspring of every womb among the sons of Israel, both of man and beast, it belongs to me. So you can't say definitively, but a lot of people think that these probably are firstborn sons that are called forth and to help with the sacrifice. And it's a big deal because these are large animals they're going to be putting on the altar and etc. So it may be firstborn Israelites. They're young, so probably just in their 60s. Some of you get the joke. Anyway, so they sacrifice burnt offerings and peace offerings. Now, some of your translations will say fellowship offerings, but that's what it means. It's just the fellowship between you and God. So burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. So as this is going on, you have these offerings being offered to God on the altar. So again, you have quite the imagery going on here with the people, the pillars, the altar, and then you have this mountain in the background that's constantly smoking and looks like there's fire on top of it. This event's often been referred to as the Ratification Ceremony. In other words, we're ratifying an agreement between us and God. God has said, I've given you these 3 chapters of requirements. Do you agree to accept these and to follow these? Yes, we do. We do indeed. And part of that is then to sacrifice offerings before them and God. So this is quite the event. We're going to accept. We're going to follow what you say. It's a reminder to the people of their sin and the cost to pay for it. That's to remind these people. Just kind of like what we should be thinking about when we have communion is the fact that Jesus' body and blood was broken for us to make peace with us. Okay? Let's talk about the importance of blood. What is the importance of blood as far as worship is concerned? Representing the blood of Christ. Okay, pre-representing that, I guess you call it. Correct. And in fact, that's one of the verses I had written down here. It's Hebrews 9:22. It says, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. So if there's no shedding of blood, then sin cannot be forgiven. So in Leviticus 17, and hold your place in Exodus and flip over to the next book, Leviticus 17 and verse 11. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood by reason of the life that makes atonement. So when these Israelites would slaughter the animal and shed the blood, that blood was to be for them a temporary covering, atonement, until the final sacrifice would be made, which of course is Jesus. I refer to this as debit card theology versus us. Or that's credit card theology. We're debit card theology, right? We get forgiveness based on what Christ did. They'd get forgiveness based on what Christ is going to do. Yeah, I haven't seen that in the book either. Anyway, this is possibly the first corporate worship session that the Israelites have ever had. Now, we had a worship session after they crossed the Sea of Reeds. But that was a spontaneous worship session. Glee, just, we've been delivered. This is, as far as I can tell, this is the first corporate worship session where everybody gets together and they're worshiping the Lord. They're hearing His word. They are committing to Him. They're sacrificing to Him. And they are worshiping together as a group, quite possibly for the very first time. And God is visually there. They can look up and, in a sense, there He is. He also says in verse... Oh, go ahead, Bonnie. Yes, I think so. The question is, do the 12 pillars represent the 12 tribes? And yes, I believe they do. One for each tribe. It says right there? It says right there. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Crucial information. Exactly right. Quite a moment. And one more thing that's really dramatic in verse 6. It talks about Moses took half the blood, put it in basins, and the other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. I worked in a hog slaughtering plant in Iowa for a year and a half. And the plant I worked at, I was a meat inspector is what my job was. And we killed between 300 and 4,500 hogs a day. So needless to say, there's lots of blood. Blood, blood, blood. Okay? It's very graphic. You never forget it. So here you have the situation going on that Moses walks up with these basins of blood, and I don't know exactly how, but he splashes this blood on the altar. Now this altar is turning red from the blood. It's very impactful what's going on here, this symbolism. It'd be a very memorable event. And then verse 7, we see that Moses takes the book that he has just written, and now he reads it in the hearing of the people. So let's make sure that you fully understand. So he reads the covenant to the people who are listening. So there again you have this worship session going on. He's reading God's word to them. And the response again, in verse 7, they say, all the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. So you have this 100% commitment. They are saying they're going to do exactly what God has done or said to do. And this also, by the way, is also similar to allegiance ceremonies when ancient peoples would join another group. So like say you're going to join another country, the rules of the country will be read to you. You'd agree to either accept and become a part of that country or not. So it's another way to look at it. Go ahead, Al.
It locks in the agreement that was made originally, and there's no, to avoid disputes in the future about what Moses said.
Yes, it locks in what is said. It also avoids disputing what Moses said because it's in writing. We can go right back to it and look at it. Good, yeah. Excellent. So, the people adhere, they agree. Overwhelming acceptance again for verse 7. And are they sincere? I think they would have thought so. hold your place there in Exodus and flip over to Hebrews chapter 9 just for a moment. Hebrews chapter 9 just gives a little bit more information about what's going on here in verses 18 to 20. Hebrews chapter 9 says, it's also the book of Hebrews is a whole book of comparison between the Judaism and Christianity and why Christianity is superior. Verse 18 of chapter 9, therefore even the first covenant was not inaugurated without blood. For when every commandment had been spoken by Moses to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of the calves and the goats and the water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, this is the blood of the covenant which God commanded you. So going back to Exodus chapter 24, verse 8, then Moses took the blood. So the blood that he didn't sprinkle on the altar, he took that and sprinkled it on the people. It also says he sprinkled it on the book, the scroll itself, and said, this is the blood of the covenant. So picture in your mind all these people, and I don't know for sure, but I could see Moses coming out with a bowl of blood. It says hyssop, which is used like a paintbrush. Dip it in and just start doing like this, and you're out there in the audience, and quite likely you're going to get blood splattered on you. Now, a lot of people wouldn't have, because there's upwards of 2 million people. So, but nevertheless, many would. Now, would this be impactful to you? Pastor Jason walked down with a thing of blood. No, I don't want to paint that image in your head. That would be very impactful. Okay? I mean, you would say this is a holy moment. This is something like has never happened before. And it's true. It is a holy moment. It has never happened before like this. And so this is the blood of the covenant. Now, it's a blood of a bull. It's not Jesus' blood yet. But this is the blood that God is using to set you apart as being one of his people. Yes, go ahead.
Also, if you look at where they come from, they didn't even believe in killing animals.
Oh, yeah.
That way.
That's true.
And so, in fact, when they tried to leave, that was one of the things against them, is that they would have to do that, and it was offensive to the Egyptians. So their 400 years of not doing sacrificing, with Abraham, they probably had to have histories of Abraham doing sacrifices and altars and all that.
Mhm.
400 years, we didn't even understand that. We're only 230 years into it.
Yeah.
America, and their 400 years, maybe 430, they're doing something that is totally foreign.
Right. So what Bill's saying, in case you couldn't hear, is that this is totally foreign to them, and also to the Egyptians. A bull was a sacred animal. You don't kill a bull in Egypt like this. And so if you did that, you would be very offensive to the Egyptians. And even to these people, they're going to go, oh, this is kind of weird, Peggy, go ahead. Yes, good point. Yes. Good point. There is efficacy. There's value to that blood. Good. Beth. Oh. Nice. Oh, wow. That's a good point. I've never thought of it quite that way before. Oh, there's hands everywhere. This is kind of cool. Go ahead, Joe.
When I was in Alaska, I did the Russian Orthodox funeral. In the funeral, it was quite shocking to me. The priest picked up a handful of dirt and threw it in the young man's face and said, from dirt you came, to dirt you'll return.
Oh, wow.
And this is 60 years ago. And today it's still in Nazi. I've never seen anything like that before.
Right.
This is the way the Russian Orthodox do it, and I wasn't prepared for that.
Wow. And yeah, and these people probably would have a shock factor too. It's a great point. Bonnie, do you have something? Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh. Huh. Interesting. Well, the story she relates, I know some may not have heard, but a couple of people, I would imagine Jehovah's Witnesses from the sound of it, came to her door trying to sell magazines, and she basically said that she wasn't interested because she was resting in the blood of Jesus, and I guess they didn't really care for that very much, and they decided to leave. So, note to self, that might be a good one. Somebody else have a? Go ahead, Peggy. Yes. Yes. Oh, really? Okay. Oh. Oh, wow. I hadn't heard that before. Mortgage papers. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. See, I always learn so much in this class. And speaking of learning more, go ahead, Bill.
I wonder, and it doesn't say this, but to inaugurate a new temple or the beginning of sacrifices, which this basically was, they would use a red pepper.
Yes, true.
And I wonder, unblemished, and I wonder if that's what this is about.
Mm.
Later on Numbers, about the other. And that's what the Jews are waiting for too. The Jews are waiting for inaugurating the temple, and they've got a red pepper periodically, lined up, ready to go as soon as they throw everything together.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's what this is about.
Possibly a red heifer. Yeah, we don't know, but that's a good point. Good. Thanks for sharing, everybody. I sure appreciate that. The next question is, who made this covenant? In verse 8, we see that the covenant is made by the Lord. So this is not a covenant between equals in a sense. So, for example, if Bill and I were to make a covenant back in these old days, we would have taken a bull, a lamb, probably a couple other things. We would have cut them in two. We'd separate them. There would be blood there, and Bill and I would walk between these animals, and we would talk about our covenant. Bill would say, I promise to pay Jeff $500 a month for the rest of his life. And on my part, I say, I promise to receive it and use it for frivolous things, okay? And if we don't follow through that covenant, the idea is, may I become like these animals. But this isn't happening this way. This is a covenant, but it's a covenant between God and them, and He's making the covenant. They have said they're going to obey, yes, but it's still His covenant. And what we're going to see is even when they don't obey, God still keeps the covenant. And that's the whole reason they're still in existence even today, in spite of all the things that have happened. Okay, let's move on to verses 9 and 11. Okay.
They saw the God of Israel, and under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire as clear as the sky itself.
Verse 11, if you have it there, Carolyn. So we have the elders, we have Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and Moses ascend the mountain. Now this is the third time for Moses. Can you imagine? Whew! Okay, here we are. Hopefully for the last time. Anyway, they saw God. They saw Him. They saw a physical manifestation of God. Now, we have Exodus 33, which says that no one can see God and live. That's why God said to Moses himself, no one can see my face and live. Okay, we also have 1 Timothy chapter 6, which talks about that no one has ever seen God at any time. God, when we're referring to, we believe God the Father. Is this a violation of that? Peggy?
Well, it says that they saw God, but the only part of the thing that they saw was His feet.
At least it's the only part described, right? Yeah? Okay.
His face wasn't a part of the picture.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts on that? Another idea is they possibly saw another pre-incarnate Jesus. But there again, they only describe his feet. Now, when John describes Jesus in Revelation, oh my, the first thing he describes is his face, like lightning, or the brightest sun. So the fact that that's not mentioned is significant. Maybe they didn't see that. However, they did see on the ground, it's translated here sapphire, but sapphire probably wasn't known at that time. They're probably describing a rock called lapis lazuli, okay? Which, what is that? That is a pale blue rock, very similar to the color of the sky, and often it has flecks of gold in it. I don't mean real gold, but gold color in it. So that's possibly what they're seeing. They're seeing him from a distance, his feet, and underneath his feet you see this expanse that's like the sky, which, by the way, is mentioned in other visions too, that he has this expanse beneath him. So this still goes up. And the fact that he only saw his feet, I think either his visage was covered by a cloud or, smoke or whatever, or they didn't dare look up. Another idea might be, oh yeah, there he is. Okay, yeah. I mean, there may be, they didn't want to look up at him. I don't know.
Seems similar to like not wanting to touch the Ark of the Covenant. I probably wouldn't want to risk looking.
Yeah, you'd nudge your neighbor. Beth, take a look. What does he look like? Come on, Beth, go. And then last of all, we see they have a fellowship meal. Good old Baptist potluck here, okay? They saw God and they ate with him. So another aspect of a ratification ceremony or even a covenant is quite often there is a meal that follows that helps to ratify the covenant. We saw that in Genesis 26 when Isaac made a covenant with Abimelech. They had a meal afterwards. And then we also saw it in Genesis 31 where Jacob and Laban make a covenant. Now, Jacob and Laban weren't very good friends at that point. But even so, they made this covenant, and they had a meal at the end of that to help to solidify the covenant. So here they are. They're eating this meal with the Lord. So let's read verses 12 to 18 and see if we can kind of make our way through. So, Teresa, if you would. And Tamara, verse 15, if you got it. Okay, and then Dan, verse 16. And Natalie, if you wouldn't mind, verse 18 there. Okay, so Moses is called up for the fourth time. You're going to go back up on the mountain, Moses. He's going to receive stone tablets and his commands. Now, most of us believe that was the 10 Commandments, and he receives lots of other information too, because you look at the next few chapters, and it's all information about how to make a tabernacle and that kind of thing. So that's some of the information he's going to receive. So stone tablets and more information. And he says he's going to remain there, which implies he's going to be there a while. You're not going to be up there for a day or so, Moses. You're going to be up there for quite some time. In verse 13, we see that like Abraham, Moses shows quick obedience. He says he gets up and he goes. He doesn't dilly-dally, he goes. And he also takes his servant Joshua with him. Now we're going to see Joshua become more prevalent as time goes on. Do you remember where Joshua was mentioned before, what he was doing? Well, not Joshua. Joshua was actually the general that Moses sent out with the soldiers. So he actually had Joshua be the general. Now he's a servant, and now he's also a general. So, and we're going to see Joshua is going to be an amazing person. So he becomes more and more prevalent. Joshua is in leadership training, so he's going to go up with Moses. Now it doesn't say, but in my mind, I don't see Joshua going with Moses all the way up up to here. I see Moses or Joshua kind of hanging around here, because when you look at chapter 32 or 33, when Moses comes back down, you get the impression that he picks up Joshua on the way back down, and Joshua says, there's a voice, there's a voice of war in the camp, okay? So I don't think Joshua went all the way up with Moses, but he was very close to where Moses was. Moses also thinks ahead. In verse 14, he says, there's likely to be legal issues when I'm gone, and so he appoints Aaron and Hur to remedy these if there is. Now here's a question. Who's Hur? Peggy. Okay, one of the judges. Yes. Married to Moses' sister? You know what? I don't know. Good point. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. My point is, he kind of comes out of nowhere. I mean, we saw him during the war of the Amalekites. He and Aaron were holding up Moses' arms. So there you see Hur. Now Hur was from the tribe of Judah. He was definitely one of the elders and one of the judges. You see him here. I mean, this guy has some pretty good clout. I mean, he's mentioned with Aaron to be one of the judges, if there's a law thing. So Hur is quite a big person. And also we're going to see him in a few chapters, because he's the father of Bezalel, who is one of the artisans who's going to make the tabernacle. So Hur is quite an influential person, and he has a family that's also influential. We also see verse 16, we have a timestamp. The seventh day, Moses went up. So it's been 7 days since the Lord has arrived. Okay? When the Lord arrived and touched the mountain, it's been 7 days since that has gone on. So that gives us an idea of how much time has elapsed. And it looked to the Israelites, we would probably compare it to an erupting volcano. They say it was covered by a consuming fire, so you figure there'd be fire. You know what fire looks like when it consumes things, but it just keeps on going and going and going, because it's not really consuming anything, it's just there. Any further sounds? We don't know. Moses is going to be gone for how long? 40 days. This is the one time. This is his fourth trip up the mountain. He's going to be up there for 40 days. Did Moses know this or tell Aaron about it? I mean, we don't know. It doesn't say that he knew. It doesn't say that he told anyone about it. I don't think he did know. He's just going to go up there and get lots of information. He's going to get the 10 Commandments. He's also going to get other information, which we'll see. Now, God is the ultimate multitasker. He does, unlike me, he does several things at once. Okay? So, he's calling Moses up to get information and stuff. What's he doing with the rest of the Israelites, do you think? Testing them? Okay. Other thoughts? Well, yeah, feeding them. They keep getting the manna. He is testing the Israelites, and I think hopefully building their faith. Hopefully, he's going to build their faith. He's going to take Moses away from them for 40 days. In fact, they're going to think Moses is dead at the end of 40 days. They're going to believe he's dead, and they're going to have to do something. Go ahead, Jen.
Certainly, I think I wanted to make sure they were clear about they were following him, not Moses. Not Moses was the spokesperson, but it was God that they were following, not
Okay. It's God they're following, not Moses. We're going to see if that's true or not, per se. Yeah, good. Excellent. When I pray like a good American Christian, at least initially. What does that mean? God, please change this, because it's not fun. God, please make it better. God, please hold evil people accountable in our government. Sometimes I prayed that a time or two. But now, right? Now, if God does all this that I ask him to do in my time, what do I miss? What do I miss? What would you miss? You pray about an event that you're going, this really stinks. And the Lord, I mean, if he were there, he'd say, yeah, it does. It stinks, right? Go ahead, Heather.
we miss an opportunity for faith when we're not trusting him to do it in his time and according to his purpose.
Exactly. We miss the opportunity to grow, to stretch, to see God deliver. He doesn't deliver often, when we want him to. Now, sometimes he does, but sometimes he doesn't. So what's he doing? He's building the faith. Moses is going to be missing for 40 days. They'll assume he's dead. The question is, what will they do now? Will they call to the Lord for direction and instruction? Lord, it appears that Moses is no more. What do you want us to do now? Would you please give us a leader, something? Please tell us what you want. We don't get that. But that should have been what they did, if they were paying attention and walking in the Lord. They're going to take things into their own hands, and they're going to make a mess of it. And God does that for you and I. When things happen, what are we going to do? Are we going to go ahead and say, Lord, I trust you, I believe you're in charge, and I follow you? Or are we going to take it into our own hands and make a mess of it, like the Israelites are going to do? That's the question. And that's where real faith comes in. It's when you come up against the wall and you don't know what else to do. At that point, that's when you see who you really are. And also, even if you aren't what you should be, God doesn't leave you there. He brings you along to make you what you want to be. Any other thoughts? Donnie? Yes. Never. Yes. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. That should be our mantra, as it were. Good. Anyone else? Okay. Not too much over. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, we thank you so much for your word. Again, these things are written to benefit us, Lord, because you want us to learn through their example, so we don't have to go through all the same hardships that they went through, Lord. We can start a little further up the ladder, or at least that's the idea. And I pray that we would, Lord. Please apply our hearts to this information. Help us to trust you even when things seem obscure, when things seem even kind of scary. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to trust in you and not to give up. Father, please be with the worship team. I ask, Lord, that you would be with the vocalists and musicians. I pray, Lord, that they would make that joyful noise, and that you would inhabit, Lord, the praises of your people, that you'd open our hearts to you to hear your word that Justin preaches, and may he preach, Lord, with power, conviction, zeal, and love. And we thank you for our time now. In Jesus' name, amen.